Good evening, beautiful people, and welcome to the Amplify series, a two-part conversation on racial trauma and healing. My name is Perone Yousafzadeh. I'm Jiva Theater Center's Associate Artistic Director and Director of Engagement. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm zooming to you from the ancestral land of the Onondaga, known in English as the Seneca people, also known as Rochester, New York. Caitlin is putting a fantastic resource in the chat where you can look to see what ancestral land you're on, and feel free to also put that in the chat if you want to say hello from wherever you're zooming in from. So good to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome all.
Right.
I'm going to introduce our wonderful panel here in just a moment. Just for context, this is the fourth conversation in our series and is presented in conjunction with our fourth audio play, available now, The Resurrection of Michelle Morgan by Christina Anderson. Our panelists and moderator will begin the conversation, and we will have time for a Q&A. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat or use the Q&A function as they're discussing these critical issues. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. April Aycock is a licensed mental health counselor and master level credentialed alcoholism and substance abuse counselor. Dr. Aycock is a graduate of the United Way African American Leadership Development Program. She obtained her undergraduate and graduate degree at the College at Brockport State University of New York and a doctoral degree in executive leadership at St. John Fisher College. Currently, Dr. Aycock is a clinical coordinator at the University of Rochester Medical Center Strong Recovery Clinic. Welcome, Dr. Aycock. Thank you so much for being here. Calvin Eaton is a disabled community educator, content creator, and social entrepreneur whose area of expertise includes anti-racism, equity, justice, instructional design, and program development. In 2016, Mr. Eaton founded 540 West Main, Inc., a virtual nonprofit organization and anti-racist education brand that promotes justice for all. In addition to his nonprofit work, Mr. Eaton serves as an adjunct faculty member at St. John Fisher College, is a frequent guest lecturer at several Rochester area universities, including Nazareth College and the University of Rochester, and sits on the Disparities Solutions Advisory Council with the U.S. Pain Foundation. Thank you so much, Calvin, for being here. Ms. Melanie Funchess has served as an advocate for families and youth for over 2 decades. She presents and trains and consults locally and nationally in the areas of cultural competence, culturally responsive practice, implicit bias, family engagement, community partnership building, racial trauma and healing, and mental health in communities of color. Her 2 decades of work experience also include the areas of education, developmental disabilities, and community health. Ms. Funchess is involved in several national and community-based coalitions and organizations, such as the Child, Adolescent, and Family Branch Council for the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, the National Network to End Disparities in Behavioral Healthcare, African American Leadership Development Program, African American Health Coalition, Black Women's Leadership Forum, Greater Rochester Black Agenda Group, and Greater Rochester Parent Leadership Training Institute, among others. Thank you so much, Melanie, for being here. And last but certainly not least, Shani Wilson, PA, is an internal medicine board-certified physician assistant with areas of expertise in LGBTQ+ health, sexual health, minority health disparities, with an emphasis on mental health, medication-assisted therapy for opiate addiction, trauma-informed care, and vaccine-preventable diseases. Community activism and engagement have long been especially important to Shani. She is passionate about giving a voice to underserved people of Rochester. She also works closely with local LGBTQ+ organizations such as Rochester Black Pride, where she currently serves as one of the co-organizers. Shani is also the chair of Rochester's Police Accountability Board, one of the first such boards in the country. I'm going to head backstage now and hand it all over to you. Thank you so much, and enjoy, everyone.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be part of this dynamic panel of amazing Black women. Just wanting to uplift all of you. I want to start off, with a conversation around racial trauma and healing. I thought that we couldn't begin without having a mental emotional check-in with all of us, and also folks in the chat. So if you're watching wherever you are, please let us know, how are you feeling right now, this moment? What are you feeling? This week has been a challenging week for me emotionally and mentally, and I think that just with we're living in this global pandemic, and the burden, the weight of it, the sort of lull of it that's constantly in the background, has been weighing very heavy on my spirit this week, and I wasn't able to compartmentalize it in the way that I have, in the past. And I also feel like there's a place sometimes to sit with the feelings and the emotions. So although I've not, I have many strategies for myself in which I'm still able to carry on through life and move on. I've definitely felt the weight of everything this week, and it's made me feel a little slower, a little heavier, and physically and mentally. So that's where I am. I'm really happy to be here though, and I was loving the pre-program music with Solange, a seat at the table, which is so appropriate for this conversation. So before we sort of jump into talking about this dynamic audio play and the themes around it, I want to also check in with each of you. I'm starting with Shani. Shani, how are you feeling right now in this moment? How are you doing today?
Well, thank you. Well, I actually appreciate that check-in. I think that it's been a week of just really feeling the fatigue of drinking from the fire hose that is all of this that is happening in our city, that is happening nationally, and you just get tired of just the flow of water that's just coming out at you, and that's just kind of the fatigue that I feel today. There's a lot surrounding COVID right now, especially that's affecting our community directly, the Black community directly, and so being a clinician, watching those things happen on the ground and trying to figure out a way to best help our people to see, understand, ask questions, feel empowered to make the right decisions for their healthcare has really just kind of been exhausting. And I've been really kind of finding ways to do my own self-care and just be bold in my own self-care, right? Especially when there's just so much to do. You just have to, just have to leave everything in the car, as my mother would say, and just leave it there. It'll be there in the morning, and just go in the house and shut the door. So that's been my practice today. So
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it's really real to acknowledge that we are not living in a typical time. So thank you for that. We'll move to Dr. Aycock. How about you? What are you holding? Where are you at today in general, this moment?
Yeah, so I thank you for asking that. I really appreciate that. I'm just gonna be very transparent. I am super emotional. And I'm super emotional because I'm in this process right now where I have been trained and indoctrinated with this Western ideology and beliefs, and I find myself at moments repeating some of this, perpetuating trauma. And I am in the process of reading and educating myself on our history, and I find it very it's painful. And I'm in the process of reading Medical Apartheid, and I'm just, it's the unbelievable experiences that my ancestors experienced, and then to realize that I'm experiencing some of that as well after all of these years. And then hearing the audio was just it's emotional right now. So I'm a little emotional right now. I may stumble off my words. It's a lot of rediscovering who I am as a Black woman, and how do I transform that into the clinical lens is where my mind and everything is right now. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being vulnerable. And, I feel your emotion. I feel the energy. Um, Practice, being a practitioner in these spaces as a Black person, you have to it's really difficult sometimes to think about you're processing it for yourselves, you're helping other people process, you're reading the information to keep yourself up to date on what's going on, you know, constantly reading about another Black body being destroyed by this white supremacist system. I don't think we talk about the weight of it enough. And like you said, that constant flow, I think Shani said that flow of you have to perform, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to meet, you have to facilitate all of this, and we don't take enough time to just have a moment to decompress. So this is exactly, I hope that people understand why this is so necessary for all of us in this space, those of us, those in the audience watching. And, because of the pandemic, we're not able to connect in the way that is so real and so natural for us as Black people. I get so much from the human contact that I've not had. And I'm also recognizing, I think it has caught up with me over the last 9 months or however long it's been. And it's really important that we talk about it. So thank you, Dr. Aycock. And Melanie Funchess, Mama Mel, we're going to try to keep it professional, but I can't not say Mama Mel just as a term of endearment and respect for Mrs. Funchess here. So same for you, Mama Mel. How are you? What are you holding? How are you feeling in this moment?
And I just want to thank you for taking and making this space. And I want to say I'm always Mama Mel. Okay, I may be Mrs. Funchess, whatever, but the end of the day, all day, every day, I'm Mama Mel. So that's fine. I'm in two places. I'm tired because it's a lot. It's a lot going on, and I hold a lot, and I have a dog who wants my attention. So if you hear him, that's what it is. But I'm also incredibly hopeful in a way that I haven't been, because people are recognizing the need for healing. When you hear like Dr. Aycock talking about she's reading and learning her history and she's being reawakened, right? To what's going on. When you hear, people in the work, I get hopeful because that creates the space for us to heal, and our liberation is tied up in our healing. And so I get excited because once people recognize the trauma and recognize the pain, then they are on the path of healing, and healing is the route to liberation. So we're about to get free. That's how I see it. And it may seem like a lot, but I know where we're going. So that's what I use to keep me hopeful in the midst of all of this.
Thank you so much. So we're here, partly to have a broad conversation, but also partly to recognize this dynamic final audio play in this series that Jiva has put on Radio Recognition, the resurrection of Michelle Morgan. So we hope that if those who are watching us, if you've not yet had a chance to listen to this play, that you do so between tonight and tomorrow as well. So I wanted to sort of begin the conversation around racial trauma with us setting a definition for what is racial trauma. So each of the panelists will have an opportunity to sort of ground us with the definition that's how they interpret it, how they see racial trauma. I am going to share a definition from Mental Health America. So racial trauma, or race-based traumatic stress, RBTS, refers to the mental and emotional injury caused by encounters with racial bias and ethnic discrimination, racism, and hate crimes. Any individual that has experienced an emotionally painful, sudden, and uncontrollable racist encounter is at the risk of suffering from a race-based traumatic stress injury. In the U.S., Black, Indigenous people of color, BIPOC, are most vulnerable due to living under a system of white supremacy. So this definition, this is not a complete definition, but I think that it sort of sets the tone with us really grounding this conversation, is understanding what is racial trauma. And I want to extend it from my perspective that racial trauma is all of these things, but it's also just the day in the life of being a Black person in a country that has been built on the suppression and the dehumanizing of our experiences. And there's so much to unpack and so many layers to it. So I want to hear from each of you, how do you define racial trauma? And I'll start this time with Dr. Aycock.
I knew you were going to start with me. And that was actually my definition, because I Googled that definition from there too. But personally, it's definitely living Black. But I thought about it for a little while, and what continues to come up for me is an insidious killer of potential and talent. And I say that because a lot of times we are experiencing these microaggressions, these, various oppression, and we don't know what it is. And so a lot of people go into their grave, or they die spiritually, not knowing their full potential, not seeing their full potential, not letting the world experience their full potential and their talents. So when I look at it that way. It's insidious, and sometimes it can be silent, and sometimes it can be very bold and flamboyant, right in your face. Trauma.
Absolutely. Mama Mel, for you, how do you define racial trauma?
I define it as being Black in America. Being Black in America is a traumatic experience. If you live while Black, breathe while Black, eat while Black, walk while Black, talk while Black, because we are constantly under threat. So when you live a life constantly under stereotypic threat, right? Threat because of what people think we are, who people think we are, or how their bias is based, on their fear, on irrational fears of us, right? So when you're always under that stress, and we've carried that stress multi-generational, so there's epigenetic transfer of this stress. So we're born with it. We're born with our trauma, and then it goes generation after generation after generation. That's why I said being Black, because we are born with the trauma, because we're born with the trauma of our ancestors that is imprinted upon our DNA, literally.
I'm snapping in my head here. Shani, for you, how do you define racial trauma?
So I would say, just to go with your definition of mental and emotional stress, but also the phrase that came up in me was just death by 1,000 cuts. And just the continuous day-to-day experience, the microaggressions, like Dr. Aycock was saying, and the constant, the bearing of the burden, and just the day-to-day, surviving, the cult, it is now more than just survival. It's like a culture built on survival, right? And you are constantly having to, duck and dodge and do all these other things, and it just creates so much stress. So, and then when you think that there's not enough racism, then you figure out that you look under a rock, or you do something else, and you're like, oh, there's some more. And you're like, oh, there's another cut, and then you're just like, okay, how am I going to heal from this when I have to just survive here and live within this? So that's why I say death of 1,000 cuts.
I just got to add something. To that. And on top of that, when you're in these various institutions that are white, you are now having to explain, because people are so curious. And it's like, you could pick up a book and read. You can Google this information. And so now you got to hold your trauma on top of trying to explain it. You don't have nobody even asks you, do you have the capacity to even talk about this? So it's re-traumatizing you with this experience as well. If I could just add that. Well, I did add it.
I'm glad you did. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember my grandmother, she used to say, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I used to, when I was younger, like, what does she mean by that? What does that mean? And now, unfortunately, I have an understanding and appreciation for what she meant by that. And, you know, the character in the play is living and carrying so much, working multiple gig jobs to pay her bills, to keep her lights on. And the interesting thing, we won't give too much about the play, but it's set in the future, actually. And I'm thinking about, Mama Mel talked about hope, and, you know, 10, 15, 20 years from now, it is my hope that we're not still having these types of conversations, and that generations coming up will see a change. But we know that there's a lot of work to be done. So my next question, you know, related to the experiences of the main character in the play, Michelle Morgan, is this concept of thinking about weathering. And so you've all given, you know, from your perspective and vantage point, and also your experiences, helping us to appreciate racial trauma and what that looks like. I think it'd be helpful for folks who are watching to really us to move into what does trauma, what does racial trauma, what the trauma of being Black in America do to the body, and this concept of weathering. And in our pre-discussion, you all had some very dynamic conversation around this concept as it relates to medically, because, you know, Mama Mel is part of the Black Agenda group, and it came out this year very, very visibly and very clearly that racism is a public health crisis. So we want people watching to understand that these are not just these academic or philosophical concepts. These are real, this trauma, these experiences have lived impact on the physical health and lives of Black people and non-Black people of color in this country in ways that white people do not have that experience. So I want you all, and I'll sort of open it up for folks to sort of begin according to your volunteering, but define trauma, or I'm sorry, define weathering for our audience. And I think it'd be very powerful for you to give some examples from each of your areas of practice on what that really looks like, because I think that we really need to start framing these into very real. It's one thing to have a statistic, but when you give that statistic a human face, an example of what that looks like and how you see it in your practice. So this is opening up the floor around weathering. Who wants to start first? Mama Mel?
Sure, I'll go. Weathering is a term that's been used around the effects of racism on the body. It's about your organs being weathered. And the example that I talk about is there's a study that says that our bodies, because of the effects of racism, Black women's bodies are our organs are 7.5 years older than our white counterparts. The way that looks, let's say I have a friend named Carolyn, right? Carolyn is white. Carolyn and I we went to high school together, we went to college together, we're best friends, and we say we want to have babies together so our babies can grow up like cousins and play together, right? So we're achieving, we're on this this career track, right? And we're getting all the way through our 20s, and we're at like 30, 31. And we're like, oh, wait a minute, we need to have babies because, you know, we're hearing our clocks ticking or whatever, right? Carolyn is 30. My body is 37 and a half. Now, being that what we know about birth outcomes for Black women, you know, when what they have said is over 35, and we have Shani here, who's a PA, who can tell us when you get past a certain age, your pregnancies become higher risk. So, like, let's say now, because Carolyn and I have decided we may have waited till 35 and say we want to start having our kids. Carolyn is 35. I'm 42 and a half. And so it's about our body, and you know what's so ironic about this is that there's this term in pop culture talking about Black don't crack, right? And I have a dog. That Black don't crack, and in saying that Black don't crack, We talk about, yeah, I have a dog who's gonna act up. We say that, you know, we look great, but we may look like we're 27 when we're 60, but our internal organs are 70. You know, and when you control, and these studies, when you control for all other factors, it is the wearing on our bodies of dealing with racism day in and day out. Now, and Shani, I just want, and you know, if you could just back up, like, because I, as a PA, you know, like medically, what happens when we're older, and if we're 7.5 years older, our organs, that's a thing.
Yes, it is. It's a thing. And I've actually never heard that before, but considering what I've seen in practice for the last 8 years, that does not surprise me whatsoever to hear that. I think, you know, Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about racism, you know, grounding the body, breaking muscles, breaking bones and teeth, you know, that it really, you just put the body through a meat grinder, basically, is what racism does to the Black body. And, you know, you know, it is how stress affects the body, and it is constant every day, day in and day out. And, you know, the thing about racism that when it affects the body in trauma is that you are constantly having to course correct and readjust and readjust and readjust. And that in itself just causes so much damage, right? Psychological damage. And, you know, I would say, you know, that Ta-Nehisi Coates quote kind of stood out to me. But, you know, I wanted to also say to Mama Mel that I'm just going to call you Mama Mel because that's who you are to me. But she's like, yep. So that period. And, you know, but one of the things I thought of too was just, you know, that the reproductive issues, right? The pelvic pain, the endometriosis, right? That usually is previously in Black women, it was considered to be pelvic inflammatory disease, which was originally derived from an STD, sexually transmitted disease, right? And that's what Black women were usually diagnosed with instead of endometriosis, which is a very common, painful disease that affects women everywhere. But we have so we have a lot of internalized, we gather up racism and we internalize it as well, and it kind of sits in our bodies and it kind of eats us from the inside out. We also were not taught how to properly get into community, process, and actually get it out of us and send it on its way either, which is why when Mama Mel talks about trauma and listening, healing, going through all that process is also healing, right? Because you take it out of you and you push it out. So just wanted to say that too.
Right.
Doctor, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I agree. One of the things too, like just in mental health and in addiction, there's something called cortisol, which is a normal stress level in the brain. And that is normal and is helpful because it helps with the fight or flight and freeze. Freeze, the numbing, can't move, and so forth. And so it is normal to have that because if you're in dangerous situations, you want to be able to react. Imagine that staying on consistently and not being in no relief at all. So I'm going to kind of describe it because I'm very kind of animated kind of person. So here you are, you look on the outside very relaxed, but internally you're like this. You see what I'm saying? And it's so stressful. And when your cortisol level increases, it increases your glucose. And Shani, you can help me out with this because you're the PA, you know, but it increases your glucose level. It increases your heart rate, your blood pressure. You know, it alters the immune system. I see people who come in and they have irritable bowel syndrome. I see people who come in and high blood pressure at young ages. And the justification is that, oh, all Black people have high blood pressure or diabetes and they just suffer from that. Well, if you're living in this world where living Black, it makes a lot of sense. But you also have, you know, the post-traumatic stress syndromes, you know, flashback, nightmares, so inability to sleep or sleeping too much, you know, avoiding, anxiety, can't breathe. So you're laying down sleep and all of a sudden you wake up in a panic attack. You know what I'm saying? And so I see a lot of people who come in and they're like, oh, I'm about to smoke this weed. forget that, because I got to relieve this stress. Or when that doesn't become enough, they go to something else. And then we start seeing people pop pills, or they start drinking just to be able to sleep. Imagine not being able to sleep for 3 and 4 days and afraid to go into the emergency room or the hospital because you don't want to be diagnosed with paranoia, schizophrenia. Well, when you're Black and you're followed in the store all the time, when you're Black and you have to keep a receipt on you, when you're Black and you got to go to a mental health clinic, but the police is behind you and they just pulled you over and you don't know if you're going to live or not. And then you got to see a therapist that doesn't look like you. And you got to say to the therapist, I'm sorry, I was running late, I got pulled over. And they don't understand the fullness of now you are in that fight or flight and you're trying to bring yourself down, but you can't bring yourself down at all. And you're trying to breathe and you feel suffocated. I can go on and on and on, but this is what it is, with living and breathing and being Black in America and how it wears on your body. But you look fly. You look fly, and people don't know that is something else going on.
And April, I just want to piggyback on that, because if you think about us and when we care, if we talk about we need more, we have the Black Healers Network and we need more Black healers, we need more Black doctors, but I call us the working wounded. Because think about this, if you're going and I'm going to work and I get pulled over by the police and I get stopped and I get frisked and all this happens and I've got to go and I've got to walk and I may work in a clinic. I go into the clinic and because of productivity, I got to start seeing these people. I have no way I have to compartmentalize my own stuff so that I can see you. And then you come in and you being another Black person and I really want to meet with you. You're coming in to tell me that you got stopped by the police. So I'm being re-triggered, but I have nowhere for my trigger to go. Right. But I need to show you, and then you see it. And I need to let enough of it out so we can connect, but I need to keep it back, and so I'm stuck. And that kind of startle thing all the time, it wears on us. And a lot of times when we talk about, we want to, why people working in the community, what we need to realize not just the stress and the trauma on our people, but also on our healers. And so I just want to make sure we put that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important that we make space for our healers and for each other. And that's the importance of spaces that are curated for Black people to come together and to support one another, especially those who are in community support roles like all of you are. We've started to get into it a little bit, but I would really, from your experiences, especially being Black women, can you provide additional examples for how trauma has impacted your life specifically, whether that be professionally, personally, an example or two that you would be open to sharing with us that really help us to understand that this is real and this is something that you're living with, right, as Black women. And also the different, we talk about the Black experience, but I really want to specifically make space for the experience of you as Black women. Not that you all have the same experience, but there are similarities in the experience, especially as it relates to this play that is the experience of a Black woman. So opening up the floor again to you all to start as you're comfortable.
I'll go first because see y'all looking at me, right? So, but the thing that I found so profound about this opportunity is that sitting here, you have different generations of Black women, right? And so the way we enter the space is different, right? And for me, like when I think about, I was thinking about which one. Let me pick a thing, right? Because today's Thursday, so I got some things, right? When I think about, one of the biggest traumatic experiences that I can think about is me in the space of being Mama Mel, right? I've been Mama Mel a long time, and I would be in rooms talking about healing for the village. And I sit in all white rooms and people would say, well, Melanie, it doesn't really matter. And I tell people I felt like John the Baptist in the wilderness, right? Calling out that we need a different way. We need a different way. We need a different way. How many more bodies? And in my community role, when these things happen, I get a call. Not because I'm this great professional, because I'm mama, right? And so when you're sitting and you're watching people telling you that this is not real, that Black pain is not real, that race-based trauma is not real, but then you got to turn around and look it in its eye daily and still sit in that room and not want to hurt nobody. You know, it's a thing, and it wears, you know, because I tell people like now all of a sudden, you know, and this is no shade to my white brothers and sisters, but y'all just woke up and I said, where the hell you been? I feel like Big Bird and Mr. Snuffleupagus. You know, for first years of Sesame Street, only Big Bird could see Mr. Snuffleupagus, and people thought he was an imaginary friend. And then all of a sudden, 14 years into the series, they decided to make Mr. Snuffleupagus visible to everyone. And everybody's like, oh my God, it's this brand new thing. And Big Bird look at them like, where you been? And I'm Big Bird, where you been? We've been in pain. So now just give us our coin so we can heal ourselves. And so that, I mean, that's where I'm at.
So that's, yeah, I wanted to pick up something that Mama Mel said about, you know, kind of crying out in the wilderness, to kind of this kind of John the Baptist type of feeling, because I've been in a lot of spaces where, you know, that since the death of George Floyd and since the death of Daniel Prude, that we've had to enlarge ourselves to fill all these spaces and bring healing to so many people all at once, right? The community crying out for justice, people wanting answers, you know, people wanting a safe space to have a place to heal and whatever. You know, for me though, I would say, you know, obviously we can talk about this forever. You know, that's like asking about my trauma is about asking about my life. You know, that's, I can't tell you all about my life in, you know, the time we have, but I will tell you this though, that, you know, I think that there is a trauma behind the Black women always being the prophet, being the soothsayer, being the one that cries out at the, you know, gonna get Bible on here, being the one that cries out at the city gate, there's the reason why the Bible says wisdom is a woman, right? And that she's the one at the city gate that people go to for answers, because that is the role that we play. And in our communities, it's like, it is easy to kind of sink into that role because we have for so long, for all of our generations, all the things. But for Black women though, it just takes such a toll, because it's such a lonely space. And it's a space where you are pretty much occupying it by yourself, just like the prophets did, right? Being the one that's eating the locusts and the berries in the middle of the desert, being the one on the side of the mountain, like taking care of goats yourself. And like as an incident, like as an aside, like I went to Bible college and studied Bible and was a missionary for a little bit. So that's where this comes from. But, you know, for some reason, I've been really finding a lot of solace in that, and just like trying to make sense of all this suffering, of just being like, okay, it is like, you know, I think Zora Neale Hurston said, you know, Black women are the mules of society, and kind of sitting with that, you know, and just kind of being like, but that's heavy. I don't want to carry that anymore. But it's like, you know, so it's like, that's such a big question. It's a big question to ask us, because it's like, how do we tell you about ourselves? We just are who we are. It's kind of like weaving in it. It's like telling you about little bits of a carpet that have a specific color in it, when it's like, I'm the whole carpet. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shani. And just before we go to Dr. Aycock, for people who are listening, specifically white people, and your point, Shani, about enlarging yourselves and being called upon now to fill spaces and to educate. If you are a white group or organization or collective of people reaching out to Black women, Black people to do this type of work, please make sure that you have payment, that you are providing payment at the least, right? That there's a budget for this work. We have to stop asking Black people to do this work, specifically in white spaces, for free, right? And I think that that's important. That I can't say it enough, right? So that's just my aside before we turn to Dr. Aycock.
Glad you said that. um, I was sitting here thinking about it and struggling, as Shani said, how do you describe your life yourself? And I'll give you a little bit. I worked hard to get where I'm at, very hard. But still people call me
Yes, you did.
April. But still people call me April instead of Dr. Aycock. Still, I don't get the pay that I really deserve. I can create a program and not become a director over the program I create. I could go into an environment with my white coworker and I'm followed, or I'm asked to go through the metal detector dressed professionally. It's having to go into the room and say, hi, how are you? Hi, hi, hi. And always smiling and your cheeks are hurting. And you have to code switch every single day. And then you come home and you have no energy to look at your kids and say, how was your day? It's trying. It's trying. It's traumatizing. And laying at night and crying. Thing, in this play was just, the audio play was just so powerful and connected to the silent experiences of trauma that we as Black women experience. Or the other one, which is that kind of white supremacist mindset of seeing a Black man, if your preference is a Black man, but yet they don't want you because they want a white woman, because they feel like the white woman is much more prettier than the Black woman who decided to go natural with her hair and feel confident in who she is in her skin. To have to answer the phone and say, hi, how are you? And talk like what Beyonce say, a Becky, instead of being able to talk like what my middle name is, Shakisha, and be okay and comfortable and accepted. That's what it is being a Black woman and having to be strong every day, all the time, until you can find a group of sisters where you can be vulnerable and you can have that village wrap their arms around you and say, baby, it's okay, and give you the voice to that. So I know I added a lot there, but I really want your audience to understand that this is serious and this is a lot for us Black females. Black people in general, but for us Black females, having to be the backbone, having to be that strength all the time, it feels good to have sisters and to have that village on your side where you can just decompress.
And you have it while being unprotected. Because understand, while we are the backbone and we
Yep.
stand in the gap, we are the most unprotected people on the planet.
That's
Right.
Okay,
Right.
we are the last ones to get paid. We're
Right.
the first ones to get maligned. We get called whores. We are the mule. It's
Right.
all of that. And like to echo what Dr. Aycock says, and everybody, and she laughs because I will say it 4 and 5 times, Dr. Aycock, Dr. Aycock, Dr. Aycock, because I understand as being a Black woman of another generation, I understand the work that she had to do to make it in that space being a Black woman. And I understand how other people will try to keep calling her April and not in my presence. So I will continually say, Dr. Aycock, even though I know that she's my April. She's not just April, she's my April, right? And so, but the thing is, but that's what women do. When Dr. Aycock talks about queens coming together, the whole thing is that it's my job to keep your crown straight.
Mm-hmm.
It's my job to help hold up your crown when you don't have any energy to hold it up for yourself, because we are all we got.
Yes.
Right. Right.
Yep. So I just wanted to say this as well, that, when Dr. Aycock was talking about, having to be everything for everyone, I want to call special attention to, the fact that, like, we are also kind of made into these, the archetype of the strong Black woman, right? Where that is all you are. You are the unicorn. You are the magical creature. You are the, the one that just like makes everything, the magic that happens, that creates all this stuff out of nothing. And that is pretty much what you are reduced to. So you are cooked down in all of this, anger, all this racism, all this just like, exhausted every day, and you're cooked down, reduced to this idea of a magical creature that does these things in order to sustain the Black race, sustain Black men, sustain society. We saw it with Stacey Abrams, like, how she, miraculously, and not miraculous, because she is brilliant and beautiful.
She worked her behind off.
Yes, she did.
Like 800,000.
And another, a bunch of, I want to say this, a bunch of other sisters with her.
Yeah, right. That's right. Thank you. So she had a team of women, Black women, working with her to make sure to turn Georgia blue, right? But the thing is, too, she said, I am underestimated, so I overperform, right? And it is just about like, always having to run and always being at the back, and yet we have the legs strong enough to run ahead of everybody else. Like that's some Black girl magic right there. But it is still exhausting to keep up that pace. And we talk about the community and other things like that. I still say that there is not enough community, and that I'm glad that we're working on that, and actually just calling it out, shouting it out, and saying, look, we need community, y'all. We got to have it, because there are people that are burning the candle. We're all burning the candle at both ends right now. We just got through 4 years.
Down the side, up the middle, and round the back.
Right.
Thank you. We're just, there's too much going on. We need each other. We have to have other alternative ways of healing that look like us. And I think, to Mama Mel's point, when I first met Mama Mel, I really was interested to hear about her forms of healing, and just hearing her talk about that, because those are the stories that I grew up hearing as a child. With my great grandmother, she was an herbalist in Alabama, and she grew herbs for the town. That is what she did. So she was the pharmacist. Like because people were too scared to go to the hospital. So it's like, traditional herbalism, waking up our bodies to ourselves, making sure that we understand ourselves. There is such a disconnect between us, how we feel, and what we can do, because we are meant to separate ourselves because of systemic racism and attitudes.
Absolutely. And I just want to touch on the thing you talked about, the magic thing, because there was this whole thing a few years ago, Black girl magic, right? But my thing is, I may be magic, but I still bleed.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And I wake up every morning and say, do I have to be the magical Negro today?
Right.
I'm not Bag of Vance. Ooh. Okay. I am tired of being your magical Negro.
Yes.
And so because people don't understand, like Calvin said a whole word when you say pay us.
Yes.
Because I do anti-racist work, and I have a friend who's a white male. They will ask him to go and pay him top dollar, and then they'll say, and he'll say, well, I can't go without my partner. And they will like, well, I don't know if we have enough in our budget, and all this, and then it's a him and a haw to pay me, but they will pay him. And he says, she taught me.
Mm-hmm.
She is my teacher. She's the reason I'm able to do this work. But because he's standing in the white body.
Yes.
Right.
I listen to all of these, like I know too many sisters in particular. I'm of the generation of better, smarter, faster. You got to be better, smarter, faster. You got to be the first one up in the morning, last one down at night. You got to work twice as hard to get half a chance.
Yep.
Right. That was the narrative that was poured into me like pablum as a baby. To understand that is who I needed to be in order to survive, not to thrive, but to survive.
That's right.
Right. And so I think that part of the whole sisterhood thing, which is part of our healing, is the job of sisters of my generation and the generation that's of my elders, to make sure that April's generation has what they need so that they don't have to have our traumas. They can get all my strength, but none of my traumas. That's my goal, right? To make sure that, like the kids from the avenue, the guys too, but the girls, that they get all my strength, all my lessons, all my love, all my richness, but not my trauma. That my traumas end with me. That because there's enough that I can't control that gets passed epigenetically. Let's not get the other stuff.
Right. Right. I agree with that. And teaching them how to, process that, and teaching them how to place it where it belongs, because there's nothing wrong with you. You're good enough, so being able to give a name to what people are experiencing is healing in itself.
Yeah. Now, I believe that as well. I think that, when we have to create healing spaces and spaces for to thrive. But the fact of the matter is, like, do you feel safe enough to heal? And will you heal when you feel safe? Right. And I think we have to still prove, that that is true. That's like, prove it to me then. Prove it that I can stop, that I am safe enough to go to heal and sit down and heal for 5 minutes, because we are running around all over the place. We're taking care of everybody around us. We are taking care of people we don't even want to take care of, that we don't even have room to take care of, because of our role in culture, our role in Black culture, our role in culture, period. So it's like when we talk about creating healing space and being intentional behind that, that actually has to be an investment in that. And it has to be continuous. Then people will start to come and sit down. Then that is when that will happen.
Right.
And people don't understand it takes time, because we were taught not to trust each other. We were taught to hate ourselves and hate each other. So there's all this unlearning that has to happen in order to be able to put the people to get into the emotional, intellectual, spirit space to open up, to start to heal.
Right.
So me just creating the safe space is not enough.
Right.
It's all this pre-learning and pre-unlearning and all this other that has to happen before, so that when the space is created, people will come in and partake.
Right. And as you're going through that, you have to be able to have some coping skills, because it is heavy. And the problem with having these traditional coping skills is that if you tell me to go exercise, or you tell me to go take a walk, that's actually putting me in danger, because I can no longer run anymore without fearing getting killed. I can't go to Starbucks anymore without the police being called on me. So these traditional coping skills are not working. They don't work. So you need that, community to be able to help understand what are some of those coping skills that's going to be helpful and safe. Because as you going through this journey, as I said earlier, I'm going through the journey of unlearning, and I find myself emotional, and I find myself throughout the day having to take a deep breath and having to remind myself, you're in that unlearned process. This is normal. This is okay. You know what? Call Mama Mel. Ask her, did she go through this? How can I get through this? Use your support systems around you. That's what's important, because going through that process is what gets people caught up, because we become uncomfortable. You have to become uncomfortable in order to become comfortable.
Right.
And that is a process. And the problem is, when people go through the process and we don't have the appropriate coping skills, we start to cope unhealthy. And then what happens? We feed into the narrative of the white supremacists. So it's very important, for us to make sure that we're going through that process and we have the proper coping skills and the support around us.
Yeah.
And something about, when we talk about coping skills, and I'm just gonna say this one real quick. When we talk about coping skills, our coping skills, because we come from a different world view. The way we organically see the world is different. And so we, the thing that rugged individualism ain't us. And so wanting, I'm sorry, I'm hearing feedback. That rugged individualism ain't us. We are a communal people. We are a relational people. And so when we go into these systems that are not designed for us, and they tell us to do all this solo stuff, that's not how we get our healing. We get our healing by putting it in the village, by putting it in the circle, right? And being with one another, but something, I want us to make sure that we remember that there's nothing wrong with us. We're having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Being Black in America is an abnormal, traumatic situation, and we are having normal reactions to it. Because they keep trying to tell us there's something wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with us. There's something wrong with society. There's something wrong with America. And what you're seeing is our response to the poison in which we live.
This is powerful, and to all of your point around that the culture re-traumatizes, because like Dr. Aycock just brought out, because the system is abnormal, the response, who could survive, right? Yet Black people are asked to survive, but then demonized, and the terminology is sort of reversed back on us when we think about, well, you slip into substance use disorder, you're coping with alcohol, you're coping with unhealthy eating habits. And time again, the narrative is that, again, to Mama Mel's point, there's something wrong with Black people, right? And no one talks about the system, how the system, it's no wonder, right? And so all of this is sort of the thread that was really powerful in our conversation prior to tonight, was this sort of, until the issues become an issue that's impacting white people, whiteness, Black people don't get an epidemic, resources, funding, grants for when it's affecting our communities because of the system. But when it's closer to the white system, then the terms change, the culture shifts, money's start to create task forces. So I want you to just keep going on this thread, because it's important that we talk about it, that who could survive, yet Black people have been surviving for generations, and yet we still don't get the resources we need until it becomes a mainstream or issue that's impacting the white community.
So
I just got to jump in real quick, because I was jumping over here, and everybody knows I say it. In the 80s, it was shut it down. War, or what is it? War on drugs. They was locking everybody up. The 3-strike rule. You're gone. And soon as what happened? Soon as the 90s came, you had two episodes of the opiate epidemic. And I'm screaming. I gotta calm myself down. I got so energized.
Bring it, baby.
Energized over there, Mama Mel.
Bring it, baby. Come on.
Because then you have the 90s, you have the 90s and the 2000s, and all of a sudden addiction changed to being a disease. It changed to being an opiate epidemic. It is more opiate treatment services in inpatient and detox than for crack cocaine.
But it's the same difference to why Amy Winehouse was troubled and traumatized and hurt, and Whitney Houston was a crackhead.
Yep. There you go.
Yep.
Let's just tell, girl, look, when it was Big Mama and them, right? It's a crime, and we need to put people in jail and prevent intergenerational transmission of culture. We got wiped out. But now when it's Meemaw, and yes, and Asher and them, and yes, I'm gonna say it, and I don't care, because I've been Black too long, that now we've got to do treatment. We've got to understand. And I think about, I'm gonna go back to the Avenue. I think about Rena, right? Shout out to Rena Golden in the Avenue. When there are heroin users by her door, she calls the cops, and then they just try to help them. But if they had been Black crack people who would use crack as their substance, they'd be in jail and under the jail.
Right.
Make it make sense. And then, but what makes me angry about this is that when you bring this to the fore, people say, well, Melanie, that we can't stay in the past, and they make it sound like I am unreasonable in my rage.
Right. Because this is the thing, right? How many Black people were dying from opiate use disorder, but now we have Narcan that's able to help out.
Well, not even that. Narcan's available on the street. You only could get Narcan in the hospital by injection. That's it. That's all. So that's even a thing. If you were lucky enough to get to the hospital so they could reverse your overdose. Now it's like you can just inject it, boom, boom, and you're done. We're going to train everybody. Everyone will know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's the narrative.
So now I have Narcan in my car.
That's right. Everybody.
Right? Now, come on. Now, think about now when it was our people, and this existed. Let's be clear. Let's tell the whole truth. We had things that existed, but they were not available until Asher and Becky.
Yep. Well,
Well,
the thing that I'll say is, like, if I can just say the obvious here, the thing that has been making me angry lately is about how ideas on how to heal our own folks is being commandeered, repackaged, and then sold to our folks instead of it being us doing the talking. And one of the things I think that we have to get better at is that we have our own ideas of healing because we know how to heal ourselves as a community. And to bring people together and put them on a panel and ask them questions about not this, but and I would say not panel, let me say committee, and put them on a committee and ask them questions about how to heal Black folks.
What do
And
I
then,
do? What do we do?
Matt, what do we do? But then you repackage it with your name on it, and then you send it out with your name on it, said that you did this, and we're like, well, you didn't do that. We did this, and it's just, so I think we have to, like, we talk about the demand about having Black folks healing other Black folks, and how that we understand what we need to do to facilitate our own healing. And that further drives the idea that Mama Mel was talking about healing as a circle within the healing being a circle within the Black community. So I think that, like, we just have to keep, like, louder, calling people out, like calling out and being like, no, we're not going to allow you to abuse and use our community, because now it's like, well, now it's a gimmick. Now it's a thing on the front page. Now everybody's talking about it. Now everybody's talking about Black Lives Matter. Now everybody's seeing about, George Floyd and Daniel Prude, right? Now it's a thing, but it was a thing in the 80s. Nobody was talking about it then.
Girl, you better speak it, because what I've said was I've been saying these same things in this community for almost 20 years. And then all of a sudden, after Daniel Prude, I couldn't sleep because there was somebody saying, oh, tell us what to do. How can we help? I said, go pull my TED Talk from 6 years ago. Hey, look, y'all know me. I don't care. I've been Black long enough. Okay, I don't care anymore. I have none to give. But understand, all I'm going to say about that is stop asking us, oh, what do we do? Give us our coin and let us heal ourselves, because the same things I do to heal brothers and sisters in 1990, the same stuff I used to heal brothers and sisters in 2000, the same things I used to heal brothers and sisters in 2005, 2010, 2015, I'm doing it in 2020. And the thing is, all you need to do is give me my coin and give Adrian Elam a building. Okay, I shout out Adrian, give him a building, give me one too, so that we can heal our people.
Yeah, and to that point, Mama Mel, and everyone listening, in terms of the funding, we've been doing this work. Mama Mel, Shani, all of these individuals, so many people in the community have been doing this work. What they haven't had access to is the funding, and that is because of the system that has systemically divested and oppressed Black people generationally from acquiring generational wealth. So to that point, for funders, for people who are on boards or part of organizations who have access to funding, fund the people on the ground doing the work. Don't fund the organizations who are the umbrella, but fund the people like the Adrian Elams, like the Rena Goldens, right, et cetera, who are doing the work, who know what to do, who've been doing it, scraping by, grassrooting it, and give us the funding to be able to do the work that we need. I feel, even just speaking from Rochester in terms of all the money, not to call any specific organization out, but the millions of dollars that have gone through certain channels, if that funding was only given to the people on the ground doing the work, I believe that we'd see a true difference, even in our community, around systemic poverty. But there is this it's this very surface level. You give you make the system will make a decree. There'll be a task force developed. It'll go for a couple of years, and then 5 years later, nothing has really changed, right? And so my hope is that we've reached a point where we're not going to be recreating the same dead end, right? The same dead end. So I know that
Can I add something real quick? Can I
Please
add
go ahead.
something? Because
Yes.
some of us, I agree with the grassroots, and some of us are not in the grassroots. We're in the institutions. Open up those spaces to get more of us in those leadership and decision making board rooms, so we can have more impact as well. We can add to the impact to what our grassroots individuals are doing as well. Open it up.
The highest levels of leadership, highest level, right? Disseminate that down.
That makes us
The
different.
sweet tea level, correct.
Yes.
The thing that makes us different is that the folks, the Dr. Aycocks still go to people's choice and gets food.
Yep.
We're still connected to our communities. We don't leave, and we are our people. So when you make us directors, when you make us CEOs, executive directors, you have a direct line into the community because we've never left.
That's right.
Right.
We just went to school an extra day.
Right. An extra day.
Okay, an extra week, extra month, extra year, right? And I mean, we need all of our people at all the levels to do this work. And it's like, we need to understand. I keep naming people in the community, but I look, because see, I'm older than you, Calvin, so I can name it, right? You go out to XYZ camp at a local college and they'll pay them all this money, but Miss Maggie on Joseph Avenue has been running a camp since Hector was a puppy, taking care of everyone's kids, and she can't get funding worth a damn, right? Let's give people their coin. Okay, if you can fund, Heather over here to take care of Black and brown kids, you can fund Miss Maggie. Because Miss Maggie's in the community, she feeds the community, she knows me, she is the community. And then in the way that we make sure that happens is we put April as executive director, and every one of the Dr. Aycocks. Okay, understand, I'm going to be very clear and transparent. If you want to find out what can we do to help, seed power.
It's a church tonight.
Are people still listening to this? It feels like I'm at somebody's house. It's like a Sunday evening, we're all eating cake.
Right? That's it.
Over like, and another thing, and another.
No, this has been.
We tried to behave. We tried to behave.
You did this, so we here.
Are there questions from the audience? I know this has been very dynamic, but we want to make space for comments or questions that folks might have before we reach the end of our time together tonight. Thank you all for sharing, and just sort of as we could go on, right? But for you all, for people who might not have seen it and who will watch this, haven't seen the play, why should folks listen to this audio play?
Other than it's dope altogether, other than the fact that it'll speak into the heart of not just every Black woman, but to people in general. If you don't do nothing else, listen to this audio play. If you want to understand and get a rooting and a grounding in everything that we've talked about, listen to that audio play. Period.
I agree with that. And listen to it with headphones or earbuds or whatever, and allow your 5 senses to experience this.
I feel like for me, the production is out of this world, the audio production, and I had noise canceling headphones on, and they did a beautiful job at, it's like surround sound, like it goes in one ear and on the other. And at one point I was like, it was so crisp that I was like, is there a fire truck outside my house? Like I thought it was right with me. So it's really dynamic. I want us to be able to save some for tomorrow night because we'll be back tomorrow. But sort of just as we close and think about bringing it a little bit closer to the play, I think my final question as we give people a little bit of a taste for the play who might not have listened yet, what parts of Michelle's experience resonated most with you in listening? And that'll be my final question to you all. I'm just curious.
All I'm gonna say, and because I want y'all to go, I want y'all to listen to it. What happens to a dream deferred? That is what resonated with me. What happens to a dream deferred?
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Shani Wilson, Mama Mel, Melanie Funchess, and Dr. April Aycock. This was just what I needed to, I feel like just a release, right? Being in this space with you, this is exactly what I need. This is what fills me up. And I wish that we could be together in person, but I feel like we do the best that we can to create that same energy. So thank you all for watching us, and we look forward to being here back tomorrow, 7 o'clock, same time, to get a little bit more into some of the dynamics of the play tomorrow night. But I'm going to turn it over to Perron here to close us out. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much for such a wonderful conversation. And Calvin, thank you for moderating so beautifully. We are continuing this conversation tomorrow night for part 2 on healing, same time, 7 p.m. Also, please make sure you check out recognition-radio.com and visit the community page to look at the work of some of Rochester's brilliant visual artists in our virtual galleries, to participate in the memory board and virtual journal. You can also watch past Amplify series conversations on redlining, on the weaponization of medicine, and Voices from Rochester's Black LGBTQ+ community right there on the community page of Recognition Radio. We'll see you tomorrow night. In the meantime, stay safe, keep your mask up, wash your hands. Have a good evening. Thank you all.
Everybody, thank you.